A single golden credit card sliced through the air, clattering against the ancient cobblestones of Edinburgh Castle. In the deafening silence that followed, thousands of smartphones rose in anticipation of the Royal Guard's legendary stoicism. But what happened next shattered 200 years of military tradition and left the world questioning where duty ends and human dignity begins. No one expected that a tourist's arrogant gesture would trigger a response that would make global headlines and change military protocol forever. The ancient stones of Edinburgh Castle loomed against steel-gray skies, their weather-worn facades holding centuries of Scottish history in every crevice. At the Queen's Gate, Royal Guard Marcus Campbell maintained his post with the same unwavering discipline that had earned him 2 distinguished service medals in Afghanistan. His dark green ceremonial uniform, adorned with gleaming brass buttons and the insignia of the Royal Regiment of Scotland, stood in sharp contrast to the medieval stonework behind him, each thread and metal telling its own story of service and sacrifice. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At 28, Marcus wasn't just another ceremonial guard. His family's military legacy stretched back 5 generations, their blood intertwined with the very soil they'd sworn to protect. His great-great-grandfather had defended these walls during World War II. His grandfather, Lieutenant James Campbell, had served in the same regiment during the Queen's first visit to Edinburgh in 1952, and his father had maintained the tradition through countless royal ceremonies. Now Marcus carried that legacy in every precise movement, every measured breath, every silent moment of his watch. The October wind whipped around the castle's turrets, carrying with it the haunting melody of distant bagpipes and the chatter of the day's first tourists. Marcus's polished boots reflected the weak Scottish sunlight, each piece of his uniform meticulously prepared during his pre-dawn ritual. His Glengarry cap sat at the regulation angle, its checked band representing centuries of Highland tradition, the regimental badge gleaming despite the overcast day that threatened rain over Edinburgh's historic Royal Mile. The morning ritual had begun as it always did, Marcus arriving at the barracks 2 hours before sunrise, his footsteps echoing through the ancient corridors that had housed soldiers for centuries. In the quiet solitude of the guard room, he methodically pressed his uniform, ensuring each pleat fell exactly as regulations demanded. He polished his boots until they shone like obsidian mirrors, carefully adjusted every brass button until it aligned perfectly, and meticulously arranged his ceremonial rifle's leather straps to parade ground perfection. Each morning, before donning his uniform, he would pause before his grandfather's old photograph, displayed proudly in the guard room alongside other family members who had served. The black and white image showed a young man in the same uniform, standing at the same post decades ago. The old man's words, spoken on his deathbed just last winter, still resonated in Marcus's mind. A royal guard doesn't just protect a building, lad. He stands for every soldier who's ever worn the uniform, every sacrifice made in its name, every drop of blood spilled on Scottish soil. Though his eyes remained fixed forward, years of military training had honed his peripheral awareness to razor sharpness. He could sense every movement in the growing crowd, the respectful whispers of elderly veterans who recognized the regiment's insignia, their own medals glinting in the morning light as they explained the significance to their grandchildren. He noticed the excited pointing of children fascinated by his ceremonial rifle, their innocent questions mixing with the constant click of camera shutters documenting his stillness. Each tour group that passed brought its own energy to the ancient courtyard, some respectful, others merely curious, but all part of the daily rhythm of castle life that had continued unbroken for centuries. Today, however, felt different. After 8 years of military service, including those tense months in Helmand Province where he'd led his unit through some of the heaviest fighting of the campaign, Marcus had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense trouble before it materialized. It was the same instinct that had saved his unit twice during ambushes in Afghanistan, a 6th sense that had earned him the nickname Guardian Angel among his fellow soldiers. That same instinct now sent a familiar tension creeping up his spine as he observed an unusually rowdy group ascending the Royal Mile, their loud voices carrying across the ancient stones with unusual discord. The morning crowd had started typically enough, couples taking selfies against the backdrop of Edinburgh's spectacular skyline, professional photographers setting up their tripods to capture the first light touching the castle walls, and tour guides reciting well-rehearsed histories about the Stone of Destiny and Mary Queen of Scots. School groups huddled against the characteristic Edinburgh chill, their teachers attempting to maintain order while explaining the castle's strategic importance throughout Scottish history. The usual questions floated through the air. Does he ever move? How long do they stand there? Are those guns real? Marcus had heard them all thousands of times, each question part of the familiar tapestry of his duty, each answer written in the stoic expression he maintained. But among these familiar sounds, a particular voice carried across the courtyard with an arrogance that seemed to pierce the castle's solemn atmosphere. It belonged to someone who clearly viewed the historic grounds as their personal entertainment venue rather than the sacred military installation it was. The voice grew louder, its owner seemingly oblivious to the hallowed nature of these ancient stones, each word a small desecration of the peace Marcus and his fellow guards worked so diligently to maintain. Marcus maintained his position, his rifle held at the exact angle prescribed by 2 centuries of military tradition. His white gloves, spotless despite the morning mist, gripped the weapon with practiced precision. Behind his stoic expression, memories of his service flashed through his mind, the camaraderie of his unit, the weight of responsibility, the price of honor. Every lesson learned in the field, from the sands of Helmand to the parade grounds of Edinburgh, every tradition passed down through generations of soldiers, had prepared him for his role as guardian of this historic site. The boisterous group drew closer, their laughter and loud commentary cutting through the respectful murmur of other tourists like a knife through silk. Marcus could feel the mood of the crowd shifting, the regular visitors drawing back slightly as if sensing the impending collision between modern entitlement and ancient tradition. His jaw tightened imperceptibly, the only external sign of his growing awareness that this ordinary October morning was about to become anything but routine. In the distance, the 1 o'clock gun crew began their preparations, unaware that today's traditional ceremony would be overshadowed by events about to unfold at the Queen's Gate. Through the gathering crowd emerged Alexander Price, a Silicon Valley tech executive whose Tesla shares had recently made him a billionaire at 32. His designer winter coat, clearly purchased for the London fashion scene rather than Edinburgh's harsh climate, fluttered awkwardly in the Scottish wind. The cashmere fabric ill-suited for the biting cold that whipped around the castle's ancient walls. A gold Rolex glinted on his wrist, and the latest iPhone Pro Max was permanently fixed in his manicured hand, live-streaming his every move to his million-plus social media followers. Guys, check this out! Alex's California accent cut through the crisp morning air as he gestured to his entourage. 3 equally wealthy tech entrepreneurs and their social media manager, all dressed inappropriately for the Scottish weather in designer clothes better suited to Silicon Valley's temperate climate. We've got ourselves a real-life statue here. How crazy is that? Drop a heart emoji if you're watching live. He adjusted his designer sunglasses, unnecessarily dark under the overcast sky, and stepped closer to Marcus's post, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking against the centuries-old cobblestones. The contrast between the 2 men couldn't have been starker. While Marcus stood as a symbol of centuries of tradition, discipline, and sacrifice, Alex represented the new wave of wealth that viewed the world as a playground for their amusement. His followers were already flooding the livestream with comments encouraging him to do something crazy and make the guard move. The phone's screen flickered with an endless stream of emoji reactions and viewer counts that climbed by the hundreds each minute. You know what's wild? Alex continued, speaking directly to his phone while maintaining a performative distance from Marcus. These guys get paid like what? Minimum wage? To just stand here? Meanwhile, my new app just hit 100 million downloads last week. That's more than the entire population of Scotland. He laughed, a sound that echoed off the ancient stones with jarring dissonance. Several nearby tourists shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the disrespect but unsure whether to intervene. An elderly Scottish woman in the crowd, her tartan scarf pulled tight against the morning chill, muttered something under her breath about privileged youngsters, while her husband, his own military medals visible on his jacket from the Royal Scotland. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Scott's Dragoon Guards watched with growing disapproval. Their grandson, barely 7, tugged at his grandmother's sleeve, confused by the disparity between the reverent atmosphere they'd described and the spectacle unfolding before them. But Alex was in his element, feeding off the attention of both his physical and virtual audience. His livestream counter ticked upward as more viewers joined to watch whatever spectacle he was about to create. His entourage, equally absorbed in their phones, called out the rising viewer numbers like auctioneers at a high-stakes sale. "Let's see if we can get a reaction, folks," Alex announced to his phone, his voice carrying the practiced enthusiasm of a content creator. "They say these guards never break character, but everyone has a price, right?" He reached into his designer wallet, pulling out his platinum credit card with an exaggerated flourish. "Maybe our friend here just needs the right motivation. What do you say, chat? Should we show him what real success looks like in the digital age?" Behind Alex, his entourage positioned themselves strategically, their own phones raised to capture multiple angles of whatever was about to unfold. Their social media manager, Sarah Chen, a former Silicon Valley PR executive who'd made her name managing viral moments for tech billionaires, called out suggested hashtags, Royal Guard Challenge, and Edinburgh Castle, already planning how to maximize the viral potential of the moment. Her fingers flew across her tablet, coordinating with their team back in California to ensure maximum engagement across all platforms. Marcus remained motionless, but his training in Afghanistan had taught him to read situations with precision. During his tours of duty, he'd learned that the most dangerous moments often came disguised as harmless situations. He could sense the growing tension in the courtyard, the way other tourists were either backing away or drawing closer, their own phones emerging to record what they anticipated would be a memorable confrontation. Years of military experience told him this situation was different from the usual tourist interactions. There was a calculated intent behind it, a deliberate provocation designed for maximum online impact. The morning sun briefly broke through Edinburgh's cloud cover, catching the gold lettering on Alex's credit card as he twirled it between his fingers. The platinum surface reflected light across the ancient stonework, creating an almost symbolic clash between old and new, tradition and technology, dignity and disruption. "They say these guys guard the crown jewels of Scotland," he announced to his livestream audience, his voice dripping with theatrical excitement. "But I bet our friend here has never seen this much spending power in his life. What do you say, folks? Should we show him what real power looks like in 2024? Comments flooded his livestream. "Do it! Show him! Make him move!" The virtual crowd's encouragement only fueled Alex's performance as he edged closer to the white line painted on the cobblestones, the boundary that separated tourist space from military ground. His followers couldn't see the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the way other guards at their posts had become aware of the situation, their peripheral vision tracking the potential threat to one of their own. The morning air grew thick with tension, like the moment before a storm breaks. A tour guide nearby, a retired sergeant from the Royal Regiment of Scotland, recognized the building tension. She tried to redirect her group's attention to the castle's architecture, but even she kept glancing back, aware that she might be witnessing something unprecedented. The usual gentle murmur of tourist conversation had died away, replaced by an expectant hush broken only by the sound of Alex's running commentary and the soft whir of dozens of phone cameras recording. "Watch this, everyone," Alex grinned into his phone camera, his subscriber count climbing by the second. "We're about to find out if tradition can be bought." He took another step forward, his expensive Italian leather shoes now toe-to-toe with the white line that had marked a boundary between civilian and military space for over 2 centuries. The morning wind carried the distant sound of bagpipes across the courtyard, an inadvertently dramatic soundtrack to the moment about to unfold. Part 3. Early tension. The atmosphere in the castle courtyard shifted palpably as Alex positioned himself before Marcus, his designer shoes scuffing against the white boundary line. His livestream audience had swelled to over 50,000 viewers, their comments scrolling past in a blur of anticipation and encouragement. The tech mogul's entourage had spread out in a loose semicircle, their phones capturing every angle of what they hoped would become their next viral sensation. "Hey there, soldier boy," Alex called out, his voice pitched perfectly for both his immediate audience and his livestream viewers. Or should I say statue? He chuckled at his own joke, glancing back at his followers for approval. Sarah Chen, his social media manager, gave him a thumbs up while rapidly typing engagement metrics into her tablet. The morning light caught the diamond-studded case of her device, sending prismatic reflections dancing across the ancient stonework. The crowd had grown considerably, drawn by the mounting tension. A group of Japanese tourists paused their castle tour, their guide falling silent mid-explanation about the Stone of Destiny. American college students lowered their selfie sticks, and a class of local Scottish schoolchildren pressed forward, their teachers' warnings about maintaining proper distance forgotten in the moment. Marcus remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed forward as decades of military tradition demanded. But beneath his stoic exterior, his combat-trained senses were cataloging every detail of the situation. He noted the positions of his fellow guards, the shifting dynamics of the crowd, the subtle movements of the castle's security personnel who had begun to take notice. His rifle remained perfectly positioned, his white-gloved hands neither tightening nor relaxing their ceremonial grip. "You know what's fascinating?" Alex continued, speaking now directly to his live stream audience. "We're standing here at this ancient castle, but let me tell you about real power." He pulled out his phone, opening his banking app with a flourish. "See this number right here? That's more money than this entire guard unit makes in a decade. But hey, they get to wear these cute little uniforms, right?" A murmur of disapproval rippled through the physical crowd, contrasting sharply with the digital cheers flooding the live stream. An elderly man in a Royal Marines veteran's cap shook his head slowly, his medals clinking softly against his jacket. A young Scottish mother pulled her children closer, whispering something in Gaelic that made them look at Alex with wide-eyed disapproval. "Come on, man, give us something," Alex goaded, his confidence bolstered by the growing viewer count. "A blink? A smile? Maybe a little dance?" He pulled out his platinum credit card again, letting it catch the light. "I'll make it worth your while. Everyone has their price, right? That's how the world works now." The wind picked up, sending a hollow moan through the castle's ancient battlements. Dark clouds gathered overhead, casting dramatic shadows across the courtyard. The 1 o'clock gun crew, visible on the ramparts above, paused in their preparations to watch the scene unfolding below. Sarah Chen's voice cut through the tension. "Alex, we're trending in 3 countries already. The engagement rates are insane." She manipulated her tablet with practiced efficiency, coordinating with their team in California. "Try something more provocative. The algorithm loves confrontation." Marcus felt, rather than saw, the subtle shifts in the crowd's positioning. His years in Afghanistan had taught him to read a situation through the smallest changes in atmosphere. The tourist groups had polarized, some drawing back in discomfort while others pressed forward, phones raised like modern-day shields. The castle's security personnel had begun moving discreetly through the crowd, their earpieces crackling with quiet communications. "Ladies and gentlemen watching live around the world," Alex announced, adopting the tone of a circus ringmaster. "What we have here is a relic of the past. All this tradition, all this ceremony. It's just theater, folks. And theater needs a good director, right?" He produced a stack of 50-pound notes from his wallet, making sure the money was clearly visible to both his physical and digital audience. The morning light dimmed as thicker clouds rolled in, and the first drops of Scottish rain began to fall. Most tourists reached for umbrellas or sought shelter, but Alex's group remained in place, their expensive clothes slowly dampening in their pursuit of viral fame. Their phones remained raised, protected by designer cases worth more than a week's salary for the average castle guard. A young boy in the crowd, wearing a replica guard's uniform he'd likely bought from the castle gift shop, tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad?" he asked in a clear voice that carried across the courtyard. "Why is that man being so mean?" The question hung in the air, its innocent wisdom cutting through the artificial excitement Alex was trying to generate. but Alex was too absorbed in his performance to notice the shifting mood of the physical crowd. His attention was fixed on his phone screen, where viewer numbers continued to climb and comments poured in from around the globe. He took another half step forward, his shoe now clearly over the white line that had stood as an inviolable boundary for generations. "What do you say, folks?" he asked his digital audience, his voice carrying the practiced enthusiasm of someone who had built a career on manufacturing moments of online outrage. "Should we see what it takes to make a Royal Guard break character? Drop a fire emoji in the chat if you want to see some real entertainment." The Scottish rain intensified, sending rivulets of water down the castle's ancient stones as Alex's provocation reached new heights. His credit card and cash remained extended toward Marcus, water droplets gathering on the platinum surface before sliding off to join the growing puddles on the cobblestones. The tech mogul's designer clothes were now thoroughly soaked, but his determination to create viral content seemed only to grow stronger with each passing moment. "Come on, folks, help me out here," Alex called to both his physical and digital audience, his California accent increasingly jarring against the historic Scottish setting. "What should we try next? Should we make it rain money? Maybe see if our statue friend here can catch?" His social media followers responded with a flood of suggestions, each more outrageous than the last. The livestream counter now showed over 100,000 viewers, all waiting to see what would happen next. Sarah Chen's tablet lit up with notifications. "Alex, we're trending worldwide now. Guard challenge is exploding." She rapidly coordinated with their team across multiple platforms, her fingers flying across the screen. "The algorithm loves this. The tension is perfect for engagement metrics." Her excitement was palpable as she watched the numbers climb, each new viewer representing potential ad revenue and viral momentum. The crowd had swelled to several hundred people, forming a semicircle around the unfolding scene. Local Scottish tourists muttered disapprovingly in Gaelic and Scots, while international visitors were divided between those filming the spectacle and those showing visible discomfort at the display. The castle's security team had quietly positioned additional personnel around the perimeter, their dark uniforms blending with the ancient stonework as they monitored the situation. Marcus remained motionless, but his military training was working overtime. 8 years of active service had taught him to read subtle signs of escalating situations, and every instinct warned him that this was approaching a tipping point. Through his peripheral vision, he noted the positions of other guards, the movement of security personnel, and the growing restlessness in the crowd. Raindrops traced paths down his ceremonial uniform, but he maintained his stance with unwavering discipline. "Let's try something different," Alex announced, pulling out his phone again. "Hey Siri, play Money by Pink Floyd." The song began blaring from his expensive smartphone, its cynical lyrics about wealth echoing off the castle walls in a jarring clash with the historic atmosphere. Several tourists covered their ears, while others began recording with renewed interest, sensing that the situation was about to escalate. A senior castle guide, Margaret McPherson, who had been leading tours here for over 3 decades, stepped forward. "Young man," she began, her Edinburgh accent thick with disapproval, "this is a historic military installation, not a TikTok studio." But Alex barely acknowledged her, too absorbed in his performance for his digital audience. "Check this out, everyone," he continued, raising his voice over the music. "Our friend here probably makes what, £30,000 a year? Well, watch this." He pulled out his phone again, opening his banking app. "See this balance? That's more than he'll earn in his entire career. But hey, at least he gets to wear the fancy hat, right?" The comment section of his live stream exploded with laughing emojis and encouragement, though the physical crowd's disapproval was becoming increasingly vocal. From the castle ramparts, the 1 o'clock gun crew had paused their preparations entirely, watching the scene unfold below. The daily ceremony, a tradition dating back to 1861, seemed momentarily forgotten, as even these experienced soldiers found themselves drawn into the growing tension. The rain continued to fall, creating a misty backdrop that gave the whole scene an almost theatrical quality. A young Scottish girl in the crowd, no more than 7, suddenly burst into tears. "Mummy!" she cried. "He's being horrible to the soldier." Her mother tried to quiet her, but the child's distress was evident. The moment seemed to crystallize the growing divide between Alex's digital audience, clamoring for more provocative content, and the physical crowd's increasing discomfort with his behavior. "This is getting boring," Alex declared, his voice carrying the artificial enthusiasm of a content creator trying to maintain momentum. "Maybe we need to step things up a bit." He reached into his wallet again, this time pulling out a thick stack of 100-pound notes. "Hey, soldier boy, catch." He made a motion as if to throw the money, causing several people in the crowd to gasp. Sarah Chen's tablet suddenly lit up with a new alert. "Alex, this is insane. We've just hit 500,000 viewers worldwide. The engagement rates are off the charts." She rapidly typed something into her device. "The team says we should push it further. This could be bigger than the Tower of London incident." The rain had plastered Alex's designer clothes to his body, his carefully styled hair now dripping onto his face, but he seemed oblivious to his disheveled appearance. His focus remained entirely on his phone screen and the growing numbers it displayed. Each new viewer, each trending hashtag, seemed to fuel his determination to create an even more provocative moment. Behind Marcus, another guard had subtly shifted position, maintaining protocol, but ready to respond if needed. The castle's ancient stones seemed to hold their breath as the situation teetered on the edge of something unprecedented. Centuries of military tradition faced off against the modern hunger for viral content, with Marcus standing as the immovable line between the two worlds. Part 5. Key Challenge. The pivotal moment arrived with the harsh sound of metal striking stone. Alex's platinum credit card had finally left his hand, skittering across the rain-slicked cobblestones to rest against Marcus's polished boot. The crowd collectively gasped, smartphones rising higher to capture what would happen next. Even the most experienced castle guides had never witnessed such a direct challenge to military protocol. "Oops," Alex said with exaggerated innocence, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Looks like my card slipped. Maybe the guard would be kind enough to pick that up for me?" His entourage laughed on cue, their own phones capturing every angle of what they hoped would be the perfect viral moment. The livestream counter now approached 1 million viewers, with comments and reactions flooding in faster than their social media team could track. Sarah Chen's tablet erupted with notifications. "Alex, this is unprecedented. We're trending #1 worldwide." Her fingers flew across multiple screens, coordinating with their California team. "The engagement metrics are breaking all our previous records. The algorithm is pushing this everywhere." She paused, consulting another screen. Major news networks are starting to pick up the feed. The rain had intensified, driving most casual tourists to seek shelter in the castle's archways and doorways. But a determined core of spectators remained, their phones protected under umbrellas and raincoats, unwilling to miss whatever would unfold next. The water ran in sheets off Marcus's bearskin cap, but he remained motionless, decades of military discipline evident in every line of his stance. Suddenly, a sharp Welsh voice cut through the rain. "That's enough!" An elderly man stepped forward, his chest decorated with campaign medals from conflicts stretching back to the Falklands. "I served 40 years in Her Majesty's forces, and I won't stand by while you mock everything that uniform represents." His words carried the weight of experience, causing several tourists to lower their phones in shame. But Alex, emboldened by his soaring viewer count, merely laughed. "Okay, boomer," he called out, making sure his phone captured the interaction. "Newsflash, it's 2024, not 1982. Everything's content now." He turned back to his livestream audience. "What do you say, folks? Should we see what else we can make our statue friend do?" The situation reached a new level of tension when Alex's social media manager spotted something in their analytics. "Alex, you won't believe this? William and Harry's official accounts are watching the stream." This news seemed to energize Alex further, his desire for attention overwhelming any remaining sense of propriety. Through it all, Marcus maintained his position, but his mind was racing. His training in Afghanistan had taught him to read situations, to anticipate threats and calculate responses. But this was different. Not a physical threat, but a challenge to everything the uniform represented. The credit card at his feet seemed to mock centuries of tradition, while the rain-soaked crowd waited to see if discipline would win over dignity. A group of American tourists near the front began arguing among themselves. "This is so disrespectful," a woman in a University of Texas sweatshirt declared. "We're guests in their country." Her companion, however, was already adding to the live stream comments. "Make him dance. This is better than those TikToks at Buckingham Palace." The castle's security team had moved closer, their earpieces crackling with urgent communications. The senior guard commander was now visible in a doorway, watching the situation unfold with growing concern. The daily routines of the castle had ground to a halt as everyone, from tour guides to gift shop workers, found themselves drawn into the unfolding drama. Alex, sensing the growing tension, decided to escalate further. "All right, everyone, let's make this interesting." He pulled out his phone, making a show of accessing his banking app. £1 million transferred live on stream if our friend here does something, anything. Come on, that's more than you'd make in 20 years standing here playing statue. The rain drummed against the ancient stones, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the tension. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by a low rumble of thunder that seemed to emanate from the castle walls themselves. The scene had taken on an almost mythical quality, tradition facing off against the modern world's insatiable appetite for viral content. A young boy in a castle gift shop uniform, who'd been watching from the doorway, suddenly spoke up. "My granddad was a royal guard," he said, his Scottish accent thick with emotion. He said it's not about standing still, it's about standing for something. The simplicity and wisdom of his words caused several tourists to lower their phones, somewhat ashamed of their participation in the spectacle. But Alex was too far invested in his performance to stop now. He stepped completely over the white line, an act that drew sharp intakes of breath from those who understood its significance. "Come on, soldier boy," he taunted, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "Everyone has a price. What's yours?" The world seemed to hold its breath as Marcus Campbell faced the most challenging moment of his military career. Rain cascaded down his ceremonial uniform, each droplet reflecting the tension that had built to this breaking point. The platinum credit card still lay at his feet, a symbol of modern arrogance challenging centuries of tradition, while Alex stood mere inches away, his designer clothes dripping and his phone held high to capture what he hoped would be his defining viral moment. "Final offer," Alex announced to his global audience, now exceeding 2 million viewers. £2 million transferred instantly if our statue friend here gives us something, anything. He waved his phone dramatically, the banking app's interface clearly visible to his live stream audience. The rain-streaked screen showed a balance that could indeed back up his outrageous offer, the numbers glowing like a digital temptation. Sarah Chen's voice cut through the downpour. "Alex, this is insane. We're trending in every major market. CNN is picking up the feed, and BBC is trying to get live coverage." Her fingers danced across multiple devices, coordinating with their global team. "The engagement metrics are breaking every record in our database. This could be bigger than the Tower Bridge incident last month." The crowd had swollen despite the weather, with tourists pressed against the barriers and castle staff gathering in doorways. The 1 o'clock gun crew remained at their posts above, the daily ceremony temporarily forgotten as they watched history unfolding in the courtyard below. Even the castle's ravens seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, gathering on nearby battlements like dark-feathered judges. Marcus remained motionless, but his mind raced with memories. His grandfather's words from years ago echoed in his thoughts. "The uniform doesn't make the guard, son. The guard makes the uniform." He recalled the pride in his father's eyes when he'd first donned the ceremonial dress, the weight of family tradition settling on his shoulders alongside the heavy bearskin cap. Each raindrop that struck his uniform seemed to carry the whispers of generations of soldiers who had stood this post before him. Alex, interpreting Marcus's stillness as weakness, pressed his advantage. "Hey, everyone watching worldwide, let's make this interesting." He pulled out another stack of banknotes, holding them up to his camera. "Should we make it rain money? Maybe that'll get a reaction." His social media team had positioned themselves strategically, ready to capture every angle of what they anticipated would be an explosive moment. The elderly veteran who had spoken earlier stepped forward again, his medals gleaming even in the gray light. "In my day, we'd have—" But his words were cut short by Alex's dismissive wave. "Okay, Grandpa, we get it. You walked uphill both ways to guard the castle. But times change, old man. Everything's content now, everything's for sale. That's how the modern world works." Lightning split the sky above Edinburgh Castle, followed almost immediately by a thunderclap that seemed to shake the very foundations of the ancient fortress. In that brief flash of illumination, something changed in Marcus's stance. It was subtle, imperceptible to most observers, but to those who knew what to watch for, it was as clear as a signal flare. Through his peripheral vision, Marcus could see his fellow guards adjusting their position slightly, reading his intent through years of shared training and experience. The castle's security team had moved closer, their earpieces alive with urgent communications. Even the tourist guides had sensed the shift, their experienced eyes recognizing that something unprecedented was about to occur. "Last chance, soldier boy," Alex called out, his voice carrying the artificial enthusiasm of a content creator reaching for their biggest moment. £2 million. Think about it. You could quit this joke of a job, buy a house, live like a real person instead of a tourist attraction. He waved his phone again, the banking app's interface glowing through the rain like a modern-day 30 pieces of silver. The courtyard had fallen completely silent, except for the sound of rain on stone and the mechanical whir of dozens of camera phones. Even the most casual tourists could sense that they were witnessing something momentous, a clash not just between two men, but between two worlds, two sets of values, two entire ways of life. Sarah Chen's tablet suddenly lit up with new alerts. "Alex, this is going nuclear. Your follower count just jumped by 500,000. The algorithm can't keep up with the engagement rates." She paused, her eyes widening at another notification. The palace's official social media accounts are monitoring the stream. The rain continued to fall, but now it seemed to be building to a crescendo, as if nature itself was providing the soundtrack for what was about to unfold. Water ran in rivers down the castle walls, turning the ancient stones black as night, while lightning continued to flash overhead, illuminating the scene in stark bursts of brilliant light. What happened next would be shared millions of times across social media platforms worldwide. With a precision born from years of military training, Marcus turned his head, slowly, deliberately, until his gaze met Alex's directly. The movement, though slight, sent shockwaves through the crowd. In that moment, the rain seemed to pause, and even the wind held its breath, as if nature itself recognized the gravity of what was unfolding in the ancient courtyard. 247. Marcus spoke, his Scottish accent cutting through the silence like a blade. His voice, unused to speaking during duty, carried the weight of centuries. The crowd leaned forward, phones raised higher as Alex's triumphant grin began to falter beneath the unexpected directness of the guard's gaze. "That's how many of my brothers and sisters in arms died during my tours in Afghanistan. Each one of them understood something you clearly don't, the true meaning of value." The live stream counter exploded with activity, but for once, Alex seemed unsure of himself. His phone wavered slightly in his hand as Marcus continued, each word measured and precise. 16 of them were from this regiment. Their names are carved on the memorial wall behind you, the one you've been using as a backdrop for your social media circus. Each name represents not just a life lost, but a family changed forever, a future sacrificed, a price paid in blood rather than Silicon Valley currency. Sarah Chen's fingers froze above her tablet as she realized this wasn't the kind of viral content they had anticipated. Her analytics software was registering unprecedented engagement levels, but the tone of the comments had shifted dramatically. The rain continued to fall, but no one in the crowd moved. Even the castle ravens had fallen silent as if understanding the gravity of the moment. "You speak of price," Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the courtyard with parade ground clarity. "Let me tell you about price. Lieutenant Sarah Mackenzie, age 26, paid it when she threw herself on a grenade to save her unit. She left behind a 4-year-old daughter who now visits this castle every year on Remembrance Day. Sergeant David Wallace, aged 32, paid at pulling wounded civilians from a burning building under heavy fire. His widow still serves tea to the guards on cold mornings. Corporal James Henderson, 19 years old, paid it on his first deployment, holding off insurgents so his wounded comrades could reach safety. His mother tends the roses in the memorial garden every Sunday. Alex's social media team had stopped recording, their phones lowering one by one as the weight of Marcus's words sank in. The tech mogul's own live stream continued to broadcast, but his usual confident smirk had been replaced by something approaching comprehension. The rain streaked down his face, mixing with what might have been the beginning of tears. This uniform, Marcus gestured minutely with his chin, the movement precise and controlled, isn't a costume. This rifle isn't a prop, and this post isn't a photo opportunity. His eyes, trained by combat to convey authority, held Alex's gaze with unwavering intensity. Each button, each medal, each movement of our ceremony represents blood spilled and lives given in service to something greater than themselves. Every step we take on these stones echoes with the footsteps of those who came before us, who stood guard through world wars, through sieges, through centuries of defending what you treat as a playground for your entertainment. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the castle's ancient stones and casting dramatic shadows across the courtyard. In that brief, brilliant moment, Marcus seemed to embody every soldier who had ever stood guard at this post, his figure a living bridge between past and present. The thunder that followed punctuated his words like an artillery salute. You wave money at me as if it's magic, Mr. Price. As if £2 million could buy the honor of standing where generations of soldiers have stood before. As if your digital followers could outweigh the weight of history and sacrifice. Your platinum card means nothing compared to the gold stars mothers hang in their windows for sons who never came home. The crowd had grown utterly still, the only movement the steady fall of rain and the subtle fog of breath in the cold air. Phones remained raised, but their owners seemed to have forgotten about recording, transfixed by the power of the moment. The elderly veteran who had spoken earlier stood at attention, tears mixing with the rain on his weathered face, his medals gleaming with each flash of lightning. You ask what my price is? Marcus's voice took on an edge of steel, tempered by years of service and loss. Let me show you. With movements drilled into muscle memory through years of ceremony, he shifted his rifle to his left hand and bent down. The crowd gasped. No one had ever seen a Queen's Guard break ceremony like this. The sound echoed off the ancient stones like a collective prayer. Marcus picked up the platinum credit card from the wet cobblestones. This, he said, holding it up so Alex's own livestream could capture the moment perfectly, is your measure of worth. Then, with the precision that had earned him marksman honors, he flicked the card directly into a nearby donation box for the Veterans Memorial Fund. The clang of metal striking metal echoed off the castle walls, a sound that would be replayed millions of times in the days to come. And that, he continued, resuming his position with drill square perfection, is mine. You came here to create content, Mr. Price. Congratulations. You've succeeded. Perhaps not the kind you intended, but the kind you needed to see. The kind that might teach you that some things in this world still can't be bought, measured in followers, or reduced to viral metrics. Alex stood motionless, his phone still broadcasting but forgotten in his hand. Behind him, Sarah Chen's tablet displayed numbers climbing faster than their analytics could track. But for once, no one on their team was celebrating the viral metrics. The rain continued to fall, but it seemed different now, more like a cleansing than a storm. The silence that followed Marcus's words was deafening, broken only by the steady patter of rain on ancient stones. The digital counter on Alex's livestream continued to soar, but the nature of the comments flooding in had transformed dramatically. Gone were the taunts and encouragements for disruption, replaced by an outpouring of respect, reflection, and remorse. Sarah Chen's analytics dashboard was lighting up with unprecedented activity, but not in the way they'd planned. Alex, she whispered, her professional composure cracking. They're not just sharing the video. People are sharing their own military family stories. Veterans from around the world are joining the stream. This is different. Her fingers flew across multiple screens as she tried to process the sudden shift in narrative. The engagement is genuine, not manufactured. We couldn't plan this if we tried. The crowd in the courtyard had grown even larger, despite the intensifying rain. Tour groups that had been heading for shelter now stood their ground, umbrellas forgotten, as if witnessing something they instinctively knew would become part of the castle's long history. The 1 o'clock gun crew remained at their posts above, standing at attention in silent solidarity with their fellow servicemen below. Alex's carefully curated image of tech mogul confidence had crumbled entirely. His designer clothes, now thoroughly soaked, clung to him like the vestiges of an identity that suddenly seemed hollow. The phone in his hand continued to broadcast, but his trademark smirk had been replaced by an expression of genuine humility. For perhaps the first time in his digital career, he was experiencing something that couldn't be filtered, edited, or monetized. He started, his voice lacking its earlier bravado, but he was interrupted by movement in the crowd. A young woman in a nurse's uniform stepped forward, her hospital ID still visible on her rain-spattered scrubs. "Lieutenant Mackenzie was my aunt," she said, her Scottish accent thick with emotion. "She's the reason I became a trauma nurse. Her sacrifice inspired me to serve others." She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn photograph, holding it up for Alex's still broadcasting phone to see. "This is her, at this very spot, 20 years ago." The revelation sent ripples through both the physical and digital audience. Comments poured in faster than ever, but their tone had shifted completely. Veterans began sharing their own stories of service, of loss, of the bonds formed through sacrifice. The hashtag #BeyondPrice started trending globally, pushing aside the original #Guard challenge that Alex's team had planned. A castle guide, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, stepped forward to add her own perspective. "Every stone in these walls has a story," she began, her voice carrying the weight of decades giving tours. "But none are more precious than the stories of those who've guarded them. Not for money, not for fame, but for something far more valuable: honor, duty, and the preservation of traditions that remind us of our shared humanity." The elderly veteran who had spoken earlier approached the donation box where Marcus had deposited Alex's credit card. With deliberate movements, he unpinned one of his campaign medals. "For the memorial fund," he said quietly, dropping it in alongside the platinum card. His action sparked a remarkable chain reaction. Tourists began stepping forward, contributing what they could: coins, bills, personal items of significance. Marcus maintained his post with unwavering discipline, but the subtle shift in his stance conveyed a quiet pride. The rain had begun to ease and rays of sunshine broke through the clouds, creating a dramatic backdrop against the castle's ancient towers. The light caught the raindrops still clinging to his uniform, making them sparkle like stars against the dark fabric. Alex's social media team watched in amazement as their analytics showed the video spreading across platforms with unprecedented organic growth. "It's being shared by military units worldwide," Sarah reported, her voice hushed with disbelief. "The royal family's official accounts have retweeted it. News networks are picking it up, but not as entertainment. They're running it as a human interest story about values and tradition." The tech mogul himself had fallen completely silent, his phone now lowered to his side, though still broadcasting. The rain had smeared his expensive hair product, washing away the carefully crafted image he'd cultivated for his millions of followers. In its place was something raw and real, exactly what he'd been trying to manufacture, but could never achieve through planned provocations. A small girl in a bright yellow raincoat broke away from her mother's grasp and approached Marcus's post. In her tiny hand, she clutched a drawing she'd made earlier in the castle's children's activity center. Without ceremony or showmanship, she placed it carefully at the base of his post, a crayon drawing of a guard standing tall against a rainbow-colored castle backdrop. The simple gesture carried more genuine virality than any planned content could achieve. Alex Price, the Silicon Valley titan who had arrived at Edinburgh Castle seeking viral content, found himself at the center of a very different kind of viral moment. His phone, still live streaming, captured every second of his transformation from confident provocateur to humbled spectator. The rain had plastered his designer clothes to his body, washing away the carefully constructed facade of the tech billionaire who thought everything had a price. "Alex," Sarah Chen called out, her voice carrying a note of urgency, "you need to see these comments." She held up her tablet, displaying a cascade of reactions that told a story far different from their usual viral hits. Veterans from every branch of service from countries around the world were sharing their own stories of duty and sacrifice. Military families were posting photos of their loved ones in uniform, each one adding to a growing tapestry of service and honor. The crowd in the courtyard had transformed from spectators into participants in something far more meaningful. A group of American tourists who had been among those initially encouraging Alex's antics now stood in respectful silence. One of them, wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap, slowly raised his hand in a salute directed not at Marcus, but at the memorial wall behind him. His grandson, who had been filming earlier, quietly lowered his phone and mimicked his grandfather's salute. £2 million, Alex finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought everything had a price tag. That's how the world works in Silicon Valley. We disrupt, we innovate, we monetize." He looked down at his phone, still broadcasting to millions. But for once, he seemed to see beyond the viewer count. "But you can't disrupt dignity, can you? You can't innovate past sacrifice. You can't monetize honor." Sarah's team was frantically trying to manage the unprecedented flow of engagement, but this was beyond their experience. "The algorithm can't categorize this," she reported, scanning multiple screens. "It's not outrage, it's not entertainment, it's not even viral in the usual sense. It's authentic." The word seemed to surprise her as she said it, as if encountering a long-lost friend. Her fingers, usually so quick to optimize and manipulate content, now hovered uncertainly over her tablet. The castle's regular activities had ground to a complete halt. Tour guides stood with their groups, sharing not the rehearsed history of the building, but the living history unfolding before them. Gift shop workers had emerged from their posts, standing in doorways to witness what many would later describe as a moment of profound transformation. Even the castle's administrative staff had appeared in windows above the courtyard, drawn by the palpable sense of something extraordinary taking place. A middle-aged woman in the crowd stepped forward, her Scottish accent thick with emotion. "My son serves in Afghanistan now," she said, addressing Alex directly but speaking loudly enough for his live stream to catch every word. "Every night I pray he'll come home. Not to money, not to fame, but just home. That's the real price of service, young man. The constant weight of sacrifice carried not just by those who serve, but by those who wait for them." She pulled out a worn photograph from her purse showing a young man in combat fatigues, smiling despite the desert dust coating his uniform. Alex's social media empire had been built on manufacturing moments, on creating content that would shock, amuse, or outrage. But now, facing the raw authenticity of real emotion and genuine values, his carefully constructed world of metrics and engagement rates seemed hollow. His phone felt heavy in his hand, like a symbol of everything he'd misunderstood about what truly matters. The device that had been his weapon of choice for creating viral moments now felt more like a mirror, reflecting back the superficiality of his previous pursuits. The castle ravens, which had been watching the scene unfold from their perches on the ancient walls, suddenly took flight, their wings creating a dramatic backdrop against the clearing sky. Their movement seemed to break something in Alex's carefully maintained composure. He took a step back from the white line he had so arrogantly crossed, his expensive shoes scraping against the wet cobblestones. Each step backward felt like a step forward in understanding. "I'm ending the stream," he announced, his voice carrying a weight of realization. But before he could lower his phone, Sarah interrupted. "No," she said firmly, surprising even herself. "People need to see this, not the spectacle we planned, but the truth we stumbled into. This is what real viral content should be. Moments that change perspectives, not just grab attention." Her words seemed to resonate with their entire team, as one by one they lowered their own devices and simply absorbed the gravity of the moment. Marcus maintained his post with unwavering dignity, but the subtle pride in his bearing was evident to all who watched. The rain had begun to fade, and rays of sunshine broke through the clouds, creating an almost theatrical illumination of the scene. Each droplet that fell from his uniform seemed to carry the weight of tradition, of duty, of values that transcended the digital age's obsession with metrics and monetization. The castle's security team, which had been poised to intervene if necessary, now stood back, recognizing that they were witnessing not a disruption of ceremony, but a reaffirmation of its deepest meaning. Several of them, veterans themselves, stood a little straighter, their own service records lending weight to the moment. One of them discreetly wiped away a tear, the gesture caught and shared by thousands of viewers worldwide. A young boy in the crowd tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad?" he asked in a clear voice that carried across the courtyard. "Is that what real strength looks like?" The question, innocent yet profound, captured perfectly the transformation taking place in the hearts and minds of all who witnessed the scene. His father, a retired Royal Marine, knelt down beside him and began to explain, not just about military service, but about the kind of strength that can't be measured in followers or bank balances. The transformation in the courtyard was complete. Alex Price, who had arrived at Edinburgh Castle as a swaggering tech mogul seeking viral fame, now stood humbled before the power of genuine tradition and sacrifice. His phone, though still broadcasting to millions, hung loosely at his side, its importance diminished in the face of authentic human connection. "Sarah," he called out softly to his social media manager, "what's happening with the stream?" His voice had lost all traces of its earlier performative confidence. Sarah Chen, still monitoring multiple screens, shook her head in amazement. It's beyond anything we've ever seen, Alex, but not in the way we planned. Military units from around the world are sharing it. Veterans organizations are calling it a watershed moment. The comments." She paused, scrolling through the flood of responses. They're telling their own stories of service, sacrifice, and honor. The rain had finally stopped completely, and a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the ancient courtyard in an almost ethereal light. Water droplets on the castle walls caught the light like countless tiny diamonds, creating a natural backdrop that no production team could have designed. Marcus maintained his post with the same unwavering dignity that had transformed a potential social media spectacle into a moment of profound respect. His uniform, though dampened by the rain, seemed to shine with renewed purpose. Each brass button, each medal, each precisely aligned element of his attire now carried a visible weight of meaning that even the most casual tourist could recognize. A castle guide, her voice thick with emotion, began speaking to her group. "In all my years here," she said, gesturing to the ancient stones around them, "I've never seen anything quite like this. These walls have witnessed centuries of history, but today they've witnessed something special, the moment when modern privilege met timeless values, and values won." The elderly veteran who had deposited his medal in the donation box earlier now approached Alex. His bearing, despite his age, carried the unmistakable dignity of military service. "Young man," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "today you came looking for content, but you found context instead. That's worth more than any viral moment." Alex nodded, understanding flooding his features. He looked down at his phone, still streaming, then back at Marcus. "I need to say something," he announced, turning to face his own camera. His social media team tensed, expecting damage control, but what followed surprised them all. "To everyone watching," Alex began, his voice carrying a new kind of authenticity, "I came here today thinking I could buy a moment of entertainment. I thought everything had a price tag, that viral fame was the only currency that mattered. I was wrong." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "What I found instead was something money can't buy: dignity, honor, and the kind of strength that stands silent in the rain, guarding not just a castle, but the values that make us human." Sarah's tablet lit up with an unprecedented surge of positive engagement. "Alex," she whispered, "this is reaching people in a way none of our planned content ever has. It's real." The rest of their team nodded in agreement, their own phones lowered, forgotten in the moment. The crowd in the courtyard had grown even larger, but the atmosphere was entirely different from the spectacle-seeking audience of earlier. Tourists spoke in hushed tones, sharing their own family stories of service and sacrifice. A group of schoolchildren who had arrived on a field trip stood in respectful silence, their teachers using the moment as an impromptu lesson in values that no textbook could convey. From his post, Marcus maintained his vigilant stance, but there was a subtle shift in his bearing. Not pride, exactly, but the quiet satisfaction of having stood firm for something greater than himself. The sun, now fully emerged from the clouds, cast his shadow long across the cobblestones, like a living connection between past and present. Alex took a deep breath, then did something completely unscripted. He reached into his wallet and pulled out every credit card, every symbol of the wealth he had tried to wield as power. One by one, he placed them in the donation box alongside the veteran's medal. The gesture, caught on countless cameras, would later become a symbol of the day's transformation. "Sometimes," he said, addressing both his digital audience and the crowd in the courtyard, "it takes standing before something unshakable to realize how fragile our own assumptions are. To the men and women who serve, who have served, and who will serve, I am sorry, and I am grateful." The 1 o'clock gun crew, who had watched the entire scene unfold from above, chose this moment to begin their daily ceremony. The boom of the gun echoed across Edinburgh, but today it seemed less like a tourist attraction and more like a salute to the principles that had been defended in the courtyard below. A young girl in the crowd, wearing a replica guard's uniform from the gift shop, stood at attention, mimicking Marcus's pose. Her father, seeing this, smiled through tears. "That's right, sweetheart," he said loud enough for others to hear. "That's how we honor what matters." The events at Edinburgh Castle that morning would reverberate far beyond its ancient walls. Within hours, the unplanned livestream had reached every corner of the globe, but not as the viral spectacle Alex Price had originally intended. Instead, it had become something far more meaningful, a moment that prompted millions to reflect on the true nature of value, honor, and respect in an age where both seemed increasingly rare commodities. Sarah Chen sat in a quiet corner of the Castle Cafe, staring at her analytics dashboard in wonder. "I've never seen engagement like this," she murmured to her team. "But it's different. People aren't just watching and scrolling past. They're sharing their own stories, having real conversations, connecting in ways our algorithms never predicted." Her fingers traced through comment after comment, veterans sharing their experiences, families posting photos of loved ones in uniform, young people asking questions about military service and tradition. The metrics showed not just views but unprecedented levels of meaningful interaction. Alex himself had undergone a visible transformation. His designer clothes were still damp from the rain, his carefully styled hair disheveled, but he carried himself differently now. Gone was the performative swagger of a tech billionaire. In its place was something more genuine, a humility born of profound realization. He had taken a seat on a stone bench facing the memorial wall, reading each name with newfound reverence, occasionally wiping away tears that he made no attempt to hide from the passing tourists who recognized him. "You know," he said quietly to no one in particular, "I've spent years chasing viral moments trying to create content that would shock or entertain. But this..." He gestured to his phone, still receiving thousands of notifications. "This is the first time I feel like I've been part of something real. Something that matters beyond likes and shares." The castle had resumed its normal operations, but there was a tangible difference in how visitors conducted themselves. Tour groups moved with more respect through the corridors, their questions focused on the history and significance of the Guard tradition, rather than just photo opportunities. The gift shop reported that their military history books were selling out, while children asked for Guard uniforms instead of plastic swords. Every aspect of the castle experience seemed imbued with new meaning. Marcus, having completed his shift, was now in the guard room preparing for his replacement. His fellow guards treated him with a quiet reverence, understanding that his actions had done more to uphold their traditions than any ceremonial display. As he carefully removed his uniform, each movement remained as precise as when he was on duty, a testament to the fact that the discipline wasn't just for show, but a way of life, a commitment that extended beyond the public eye. A senior castle administrator, Mrs. MacLeod, approached Alex with an unusual request. "Mr. Price," she began, her Scottish accent carrying decades of service in these halls, "we've had an unprecedented number of inquiries about supporting our veterans programs. Would you consider using your platform to help us establish a more permanent way for people to contribute?" Her eyes, wise with experience, studied his face for any remnant of his former superficiality. Alex didn't hesitate. "Actually," he replied, pulling out his phone not to film but to take notes, "I have something better in mind." He began outlining a plan to create a foundation that would support military families, preserve military traditions, and educate the public about the true meaning of service. No viral gimmicks, he assured her, just authentic stories and real support. "I want to use my resources to make a genuine difference, not just create content." Sarah's team had begun receiving messages from major news networks all wanting to cover the story, but instead of focusing on the confrontation, they were interested in exploring the deeper themes that had emerged: the clash between modern viral culture and timeless values, the meaning of sacrifice in a digital age, the power of genuine honor to transcend social media spectacle. Even the most cynical journalists seemed moved by the authenticity of what had transpired. Throughout the afternoon, visitors continued to stop by the donation box where Alex's credit card still lay alongside the veteran's medal. Many left their own contributions, not just money, but letters, photographs, and personal tokens of respect. The castle staff had to bring in a larger container to hold everything, each item representing a personal connection to the day's events. One elderly woman left her husband's service medal with a note that read, "Finally, a proper home for his honor." A group of young social media influencers who had witnessed the morning's transformation approached the castle administration with an unexpected proposal. They wanted to create a respectful series about military traditions and the people who maintain them. Not for clicks or likes, their spokesperson explained, but because some things deserve to be treated with genuine respect. Their sincerity was evident in their thoughtful questions and careful attention to protocol. As evening approached and the castle prepared to close for the day, the impact continued to spread. Military units around the world had begun sharing their own stories, creating a ripple effect of authentic connection that transcended national boundaries. Veteran organizations reported a surge in support and interest, while military recruitment offices noted an increase in inquiries from young people interested in service rather than just social media fame. Marcus's final act before leaving for the day was to revisit the memorial wall. He stood before it in civilian clothes now, but with the same dignity he showed on duty. A small group of visitors noticed him and fell quiet, recognizing him from the morning's events. Without anyone organizing it, they naturally formed a respectful semicircle, sharing in a moment of silent reflection. The setting sun cast long shadows across the courtyard, turning the ancient stones golden and creating an almost sacred atmosphere. As night fell over Edinburgh Castle, the day's events had already begun to take on an almost legendary quality. The viral video, so different from what Alex Price had initially planned, had sparked a global conversation about respect, tradition, and the true meaning of value in the modern world. News outlets worldwide were running the story not as a scandal or spectacle, but as a moment of cultural significance that transcended the usual social media fare. In the castle's administrative offices, Mrs. MacLeod was reviewing an unprecedented flood of emails and messages. Military organizations, educational institutions, and cultural preservation groups from around the world had reached out, all seeking to build on the day's events in meaningful ways. Her computer screen glowed with proposals for educational programs, documentary projects, and initiatives to bridge the gap between traditional values and modern media. "We've never seen anything like this," she explained to her staff, her voice carrying decades of experience within these ancient walls. "But what's remarkable isn't the quantity of responses, it's their quality. People aren't just reacting, they're reflecting, connecting, wanting to understand and preserve what these stones and traditions truly represent." Alex Price sat in the castle's visitor center, working intently with Sarah Chen and their team, but their focus had shifted dramatically. Gone were the analytics of viral engagement and social media metrics. Instead, They were developing frameworks for a new kind of digital platform, one dedicated to preserving and sharing stories of service, sacrifice, and honor from around the world. The foundation will be called Beyond Price, Alex explained, the irony of the name not lost on anyone present. Its mission won't be to generate content or chase trends. Instead, we'll create spaces where real stories can be shared, where tradition and modern technology can serve something greater than entertainment. His team, who had arrived that morning ready to manufacture viral moments, now worked with renewed purpose on something authentically meaningful. Marcus Campbell's story had taken on a life of its own. Military units worldwide had begun incorporating the incident into their training programs, not just as an example of maintaining composure under pressure, but as a testament to the enduring power of dignity and tradition in a rapidly changing world. His stance, both physical and moral, had become a symbol of resistance against the commodification of honor. The castle gift shop, usually quiet at this hour, remained busy with visitors seeking more than just souvenirs. The military history section had been completely restocked twice, and a new display featured books about the Royal Guard tradition. Children who had earlier in the day asked for toy swords now requested books about military service and honor, their parents grateful for the shift in interest. In the guard room, as the evening shift prepared for duty, the atmosphere was different. The usual pre-duty routine carried new weight, each movement and inspection informed by the day's reminder of what their service truly meant. Veterans who had witnessed the events shared stories with younger guards, creating bridges between generations of service. "It's not about the uniform," one senior guard explained to a recent recruit. "It's about what it represents." Today reminded us all that some traditions aren't relics. They're living connections to values that matter now more than ever. The younger guard nodded, understanding that their role went far beyond ceremonial duty. Outside, in the now quiet courtyard, the donation box had been carefully emptied, its contents catalogued with respect. Alex's credit cards, the veteran's medal, and countless other tokens of respect would become part of a new exhibition about the intersection of tradition and modern life. The castle curator was already planning a permanent display that would tell the story of this day to future generations. Local Edinburgh residents, who normally avoided the tourist-heavy castle, began arriving in the evening hours. They moved quietly through the courtyard, many leaving flowers or personal notes at the memorial wall. Some shared stories of family members who had served, while others simply stood in respectful silence, appreciating their city's role in a moment of global significance. The impact rippled beyond the castle walls. Social media companies reported a marked shift in user behavior, with a surge in content focused on heritage, tradition, and authentic human connection. The hashtag #BeyondPrice had evolved from a trending topic into a movement, inspiring people to share stories of things in their lives that held value beyond monetary measure. As the last visitors left for the day, Alex made one final gesture. He approached Mrs. McLeod with a proposal that would have seemed impossible that morning. "I'd like to establish a permanent endowment," he said, "not for publicity, but to ensure that the traditions preserved here never have to compromise for lack of resources." His voice carried no trace of its former performative quality, only genuine conviction. The castle's lights began to come on, illuminating the ancient stones with a warm glow. In the guard room, Marcus prepared to head home, but not before one final look at his grandfather's photograph. The old image seemed different now, as if the day's events had added new layers of meaning to a familiar sight. He understood more than ever why his grandfather had always said that some things were truly beyond price. As dawn broke over Edinburgh Castle the next morning, the transformation that had begun with a tourist's arrogant gesture had solidified into something permanent and profound. The morning light touched the ancient stones differently now, or perhaps it was just that people were seeing them with new eyes. The usual queue of tourists at the castle gates had a distinctly different character, more reverent, more engaged, more aware of the living history they were about to encounter. Marcus Campbell arrived for his morning shift to find something unexpected. The path to his post was lined with fresh flowers, handwritten notes, and small tokens of respect left by visitors from the previous day. Each step he took toward his position carried new weight, not from burden, but from meaning. His routine preparation, already meticulous, seemed to take on an almost sacred quality. In Silicon Valley, Alex Price's corporate headquarters was undergoing its own transformation. Screens that had once displayed viral metrics and engagement rates now showed something entirely different. The newly established Beyond Price Foundation was already processing thousands of applications from veterans organizations and cultural preservation groups. Alex himself had traded his designer suits for more modest attire, his former swagger replaced by purposeful humility. Sarah Chen, working from a makeshift office in Edinburgh, coordinated with global media outlets seeking to cover the story. But her approach had changed dramatically. "We're not selling a narrative," she explained to her team. "We're preserving one. There's a difference." Her analytics software still ran in the background, but the metrics it tracked now measured meaningful engagement rather than viral spread. The castle administration had been flooded with requests from military units worldwide, seeking to incorporate the previous day's events into their training programs. Mrs. MacLeod found herself coordinating with defense ministries and cultural attachés, all eager to understand how a moment of potential disrespect had transformed into a global lesson about honor and tradition. The donation box, now emptied and preserved for the castle's museum, had yielded more than just monetary contributions. Among the items catalogued were military medals from multiple nations, letters from veterans spanning 7 decades of service, and countless personal tokens of respect. Each item told its own story of how the previous day's events had touched someone deeply enough to share a piece of their own history. The impact continued to ripple outward. Social media companies reported a sustained shift in user behavior, with a noticeable decline in provocative challenge videos and a surge in content celebrating tradition, respect, and authentic human connection. The term going viral itself seemed to be evolving, taking on new meaning in a post-Beyond Price world. Marcus's afternoon shift would be his last at Edinburgh Castle. He had accepted a new role, proposed jointly by the military and Alex's foundation, teaching young people about the intersection of tradition and modern life. His first class would include both veterans' children and former social media influencers, all seeking to understand how to preserve what matters in a rapidly changing world. As the sun set on this new chapter, casting long shadows across the castle courtyard, Alex Price stood one last time before the memorial wall. The names engraved there meant something different to him now. Each one represented not just a life given in service, but a testament to values that no amount of money or social media fame could ever replace. "Some lessons," he wrote in what would become his final social media post, "cost everything we think is important to teach us what truly is." The post went viral, but in a way that would have been unrecognizable to his former self. Instead of generating fleeting entertainment, it sparked lasting conversations about worth, honor, and the price of wisdom. The story of the tourist and the guard would be told countless times in the years that followed, each retelling adding new layers of understanding. But perhaps its greatest legacy was invisible, a subtle shift in how people viewed the world and what they valued in it. In the end, it wasn't just about a guard who stood his ground or a tourist who learned humility. It was about rediscovering that some things truly are beyond price, and that in a world obsessed with going viral, the most powerful moments are those that change us forever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.